A class declaration defines a new user-defined data type. In the syntax, private, protected, and public, these are called as access specifier. Addition of two numbers, we require two numbers A and B, that is for to enter values for two numbers. The syntax to invoke a function of inside the class is object name dot get num. Here dot is an operator. Dear students, welcome to Computer Science classes. I am Ravi Kumar KR, lecturer in Computer Science, Vidhyaashram PU College, Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. Student, today let us start our session with the chapter 7, is a new chapter, classes and objects. Students, in this chapter, we are going to cover the topics definition and declaration of class, means how do we define a class. Then access specifiers. Here we have three levels of specifiers. They are private, public, and protected. We are going to learn the definitions and usage of these specifiers. And member function inside a class. How do you define a function inside a class? And member function outside a class. How do you define a function outside a class? And define an object of a class and array of objects. These are the topics to be covered in the chapter classes and object. Now let us move on to next slide. Now let us see the difference between procedural programming and object-oriented programming. In our previous session or in the previous chapter, that is OOPS concept, there we have learned the definition of OOPS concepts and as well as the characteristics of OOPS concepts. So, students, now let us see the difference between procedural programming and object-oriented programming. In procedural programming, we are using variables and here user-defined data types, structure members, and functions and function call. These are normal procedure of methods we are using in procedural programming. Now, look at the object-oriented programming. So here we are using the concept of objects and classes. So this chapter we are going to learn in detail how do you define a classes and how do we declare an object of a particular class. So we are using the concept of object, class, instance variable, methods, and message passing. These are the things we have learned in our previous session, the definition and features of OOPS concepts. So these are the main differences between the procedural programming and object programming. Now let us move on to next slide. Now let us see what is a class here. To combine the data variable, that is called objects, along with the appropriate function for manipulation of these objects, the concept of classes was introduced in OOPS concept or object-oriented programming concept. So here we use the concept of object and classes. You have learned the definition of object. It is an entity or a thing which has characteristics and behavior. And what is the classes? It is a group of objects of similar behavior and characteristics. So we are using those concepts here. And a class declaration defines a new user-defined data type. And you know what are data types in programming concept? So classes, if we use the concept of class, it is a user-defined data types. So that links data and the code manipulates the data. In other words, a class, it combines the data elements and the functions into a single entity. So it is a group of objects of similar behavior and characteristics. So here, if we talk about a class, inside a class, we can find data members or data and the member functions or the functions which is going to operate on those data, so into a single unit called class. So this is the definition of a class. Classes combine both the data elements and the operations associated with the data. That's what I told you just now with this point. Now the data elements in a class are called member data. Here we use the word member data, and the functions are called as member functions or member methods. These are the different terms we are using in with respect to classes and objects. Now, a class definition is a process of naming a class and data variables and interface operations of the class. So here, what is the concept of defining a class? The meaning of defining is we have to name a class, and also we have to mention the data variables along with the methods or the functions associated with this data. The definition and declaration of a class indicate the following. These are the features of that. The data variables known as member data describes the characteristics of a class. Now we have learned the definition of an object. Object is an item or entity which has characteristics and behavior. So with respect to programming concept, so characters are representing with member data, and the member functions are set of operations that operates on this object of a class. These may be zero or more the number of functions in a class. This is also known as interface. We know what is a class and we know what are data members, and the member functions associated with this data are called member methods or member functions. This is known as an interface. That is the meaning of the word interface. It is going to connect the data along with the functions. So this is an interface. Now, the access control specifiers. The access control specifies to the class members within a program are called or specified. Here, once the data and member functions are declared into the class, those data and member functions can be restricted, or it can be access control can be specified. Class tag name. The class tag name for external operations for accessing and manipulating the instance of a class. Here we have to make use of a class. It is a tag name or name of a class to work with objects or classes and objects. So these are the few characteristics of a class, or we have to remember those points to define a class in programming concepts. Now let us see the syntax. General syntax for defining a class means how do you define a class in programming. So here class is the reservoir, the tag name, and user defined name. User defined name, open this bracket, and private colon member data member functions semicolon, and next one is protected and member data member functions, and public colon member data and member function. We are closing the class with this bracket with closed parenthesis and semicolon. This is the syntax of how to define a class in programming. So now let us see the meaning of all these things. Here, the class is a reserved word. It is called as a keyword or a reserved word to declare a class or to identify a class. And this is user defined name. This is nothing but an identifier. So user can write name to identify a class in program. So this is user defined name, nothing but an identifier. Then the class starts with open parenthesis, and next one is private. These privates, the class body is enclosed in a pair of flower bracket or parentheses. So from this opening bracket and closing bracket or parentheses, so inside this, all these are called body of a class. This is nothing but a body of a class. Class body contains the declaration of its members, data and function. So as we have learned in previous slide, so this class, it contains the member data or data members along with the member functions associated with the data. So these are enclosed inside the class, or these are we have to define inside or between these two brackets. Next, there are three types of members, namely private, public, and protected. Here in the syntax, private protected, and public, these are called as access specifiers. So these are the access specifier used to control the access level to these data members as well as member method. So that is the use of these access specifier. Now let us see an example for this. Class is a reserved account. This is the name of the class or it's an identifier. So class name in this example, name of the class name is account, and open the bracket, and here access specifier, this is a private, and here inside this we are using a variables. They are called as data members, int account number, and here character name of 20, size is 20, character account type size is 4, int balance amount. See, these are all called data members, and these are declared under private access specifier. And under public, we are defining a function or member methods. In this example, void space get data. Get data is a method or it is a function. And void space display data. Display data is also another function defined inside this class here. So this is an example for how to define a class. Now let us see the next slide. Let me explain the same concept with an example. Now, a program to show the use of class and objects. Let us take an example of addition of two numbers. So how the program starts? In program starts with the header file, hash include iostream.h and hash include conio.h. These are the header files. Next, the class is the reserved test. Test is the name of the class. Test is the name of the class. Open this flower bracket, open parenthesis, and here access specifier. This is all private. So under private there are two variables, int a comma b. Addition of two numbers. We require two numbers a and b. That is for to enter values for two numbers a and b. And under public, we are defining a class, declaring and defining a class. Here void get num. This is a function or a method. Inside that we are writing a statement, C++ statement to accept the values for variables a and b. So this is a function under public. Open the bracket, write the statement here, and C in a and b, close it. So this is one function defined inside the class. Next one is we are writing one more function, void show data. So this is one more method or one more function. Inside this we are writing a statement to print the values of a and b or addition of two numbers a and b. Then we are closing the bracket, closing the function here. Then we are closing the class here with semicolon. This is very, very important here. So generally in program with class and object, we declare the data members under private access specifiers, and all the functions are declared under public access specifier. So accordingly, in this example, this is a class, name of the class is test. Under private, we are declaring variables a and b. Under public, we are defining two functions. One is void getNum is a function to enter the values for a and b, and another function void show data. This is to display the result and closing the class. So this is how we have defined the class. And next one is we have to write the void main function, because in C++ all of you know that void main is the main function that should be there in a program, because without main program your program cannot be executed. So we have to write void main function. So void main is a normal function, and open this function here and clear screen. Now this is the place, the first step inside this void main will be to create an object of a class. So here test is name of the class. Observe this. Here we are given the name as a class test. So test is name of the class. The syntax would be test space A1. Here A1 is an object of a class test. So this is the first step. First step, we have to create an object of a class inside the main function. Next, after that, we have to call all the functions, or we have to invoke the functions declared into the class in the order. So in this function, A1. A1 is name of an object. Dot is an operator, and getNum is name of the function what we have defined here. This is the void getNum. So we are going to call void getNum is the first function. So how we are used to call this function? With the help of dot operator. The syntax would be object name dot function name. I repeat, the syntax to invoke a function of inside the class is object name dot getNum. Here dot is an operator, and after this next function is a1 dot show data. So in the example, this is the second class, show data, that has to be called, that has to be invoked. Then get ch, close the bracket here. So we are closing void main function. So this is how we write a program with classes and object. In last year, in first year, you have learned a program with only one function, that is only one main function. Now, the program with classes and object, it includes, we have to define the class along with the data members and member functions. And after closing the class, we have to write the main function. And inside the main function, first thing, we have to declare an object of a class. So if you don't declare an object of a class here, so it is not possible for us to access the member function. So here, how do we create an object of a class? The syntax would be name of a class space object name. Here object name is an identifier. So again, how do we call these functions? Here a1 is name of an object dot function getNum, and a1 dot show data. Then we are closing the main function. So this is how to write a program with classes and object. Now output of the program would be enter two numbers for addition, 50 and 60. Suppose if we enter two numbers, two values, here 50 and 60. 50 goes to a variable A, this is for variable B, and addition of two numbers will be 110. So this is the result. So this is an example program to show how to define a class with respect to programming. Now let us move on to next slide. This is access specifiers. As we have seen in the previous example, private, public and protected are called as access specifier. And what is the purpose of this? What is the use of this? Protection for hiding the data and function members. So here, we are using access specifiers to control the access permission to the members of a class. It can be a data member as well as member function. The access specifiers define the scope of the data. Scope means access level or access permission. And the access specifiers are indicated using the keywords. Here, the access specifiers, as what you have seen, the private, public and protected. Now, this is what you have written here. This is a private, it is a keyword or reserved word. So, private, public and even the protected or a reserved words or keywords. So, this is how to define a access specifiers in a class. Students, in this session, we have learned how to define a class with respect to programming concepts, and we have learned the definition with an example, and also we have seen a simple program, addition of two numbers with the concept of classes and objects. Now let us continue our discussion in our next session. Thank you very much.